Duration of existence. The existence of all particles in the universe is relatively equal. We perceive entities based on their composition, organization, space occupancy, and inherent properties. Occupancy of space over a period of time by a physical entity is the existence of that entity. Some exist for an extended period of time, while others for so little time. A bubble floating around floats in the air for about a few seconds. A meteorite called the Murchison meteorite that fell in Australia is about 7 billion years old, older than Earth and older than the Sun. Eventually, however, every entity would lose the matter and mix with the environment to form something else. Ceasing to exist is to lose itself and become a part of the environment by the submission of the matter and energy it was made up of. There is always degradation of an entity and formation of another. They transform. Some degrade very slowly, while others degrade relatively fast. Some entities grow in size too, such as crystals. The laws of physics govern the rate of change. Often, the change is degradation. The laws of physics act within the entity, on the environment, and on the system as a whole. The thermodynamic state of the entity and that of the practical environment determines the duration of existence and the rate of change of that entity, either degradation or growth. Entity, environment, and life. As a matter of focus or description, we speak of a thing as an entity distinct from its surroundings. All factors that surround or can influence the entity constitute its environment. The environment encompasses every other entity, force, and factor outside the body of the entity that affects it, playing a significant role in shaping the form and functions of the entity and its parts. The environment includes the laptop, a friend, a dog, a mountain, the sun, stars, trees, and clouds. The environment may be close or distant, exert a direct or indirect influence, and consistently affect the entity or only occasionally. It can be periodic or accidental in nature. All the rare events that are highly improbable yet do occur and have an influence on the entity, such as meteor strikes, can be categorized as part of the accidental environment. The interactions between the environment and its entity at the molecular level are often rationales of physics or chemistry. While the interactions of non-living things are always governed by the laws of physics and chemistry, living organisms have emergent phenomena that often cannot be described by physics or chemistry alone. When there is a life component in a system, a whole new level of science emerges, and that is what biology indeed should mean: the study of all the complex emergent phenomena in living things and their habitats. Biology is complex because there is so much diversity in the components, types of organisms, their modes of energy and matter derivation, and the interactions between types of organisms. To complicate the field further, there will be changes in the components in terms of numbers and quality. Evolution. New mysterious biological entities are yet to evolve. Therefore, the study of life will never end as long as there is life. Biology is studied at different levels, such as in molecules, genetic information, cells, tissues, organisms, and populations, requiring diverse skill sets. A salt crystal, when put in water, dissolves. In contrast, the same crystal grows in size when put in a supersaturated salt solution. The environment determines what happens to the entity here. Similarly, an iron nail gets rusted when exposed to air due to oxidation, which eventually causes it to fall apart and degrade. An ice cube melts when taken out of the freezer and put at room temperature, 25 degrees Celsius. The existence of these entities, owing to their chemical and material nature, is destined to reach a thermokinetic equilibrium with their surroundings. In simple terms, the energy state of the entity should be nearly equal to the effective environment. One can also express the same in terms of entropy, the disorderly arrangement of molecules. Entities with low entropy that are highly ordered are destined to degrade to increase the entropy. Therefore, a nail will rust, degrade, and lose its existence. There are inherent opposing forces within an entity. A double-stranded DNA is held together by attractive forces, numerous hydrogen bonds between complementary bases in the center. But there are also repulsive forces on the phosphate sugar backbone of the complementary strands. The electronegative phosphates on the complementary strands tend to repel each other. Typically, double-stranded DNA exists because of higher attraction than repulsion. DNA molecules can denature separation of the two strands in solutions outside cells and in cells. In solutions, factors like temperature, pH, and salt concentration play a role in the denaturation of DNA. For example, when a solution of the DNA is heated, the strands separate because the hydrogen bonds are broken, reduced forces of attraction. When put in higher salt concentration, the same DNA molecule's denaturation requires more energy. When put in higher salt concentration, the cations, positive ions from the salt coat on the electronegative phosphates in the backbone. Therefore, the repulsive forces between the two strands are reduced, requiring more energy for denaturation. The behavior of DNA is dependent on environmental conditions. In the cells, the DNA is in a way sufficiently insulated from the ever-changing environmental conditions. Cells tend to maintain constant physiological conditions by altering the concentration of ions and regulating the flux of ions and water across the membranes. Sometimes they synthesize specialized proteins or lipids to buffer harsh conditions. Similarly, cells change shape and properties in response to their surroundings. There is a classic experiment using red blood cells, RBC, and solutions with varying salinity. RBCs in high salt concentrations would shrink by expelling the water from within. RBCs in low salt concentrations lower than within the RBCs, and the RBCs will swell by taking up the water from the surroundings. What determines if, when, and how water enters or leaves? Is it the entity or the environment? Who is losing energy and matter, entity or the environment? Who is changing the other? That is the key junction of the transition from living to non-living in the continuum of matter. The cell is a whole of thousands of different components and concentrations. Each type performs specific work that culminates in the existence of the cells. The structure of these components determines the function that is the basis of all biochemistry. It is open to interpretation, whether it is a conscious response or just complicated chemistry. One could argue that the enzymes and proteins are the ones that are changing the nature of the cell and thereby ensuring the existence of the cell. Most proteins change shape in response to their surroundings, interactions with water, ions, and other biomolecules, affecting their activity. Change in conformation affects different proteins differently. Some proteins gain activity, some lose activity, some change interacting partners, etc. That complex emergent phenomenon arising from the changes in conformations and activities of different proteins is the structural basis of life at the molecular level. The structural dynamism in protein and nucleic acids is the key. We should always remind ourselves that the composition of proteins arises from the logical program, the genetic information. The genome of every cell is the informational center that decides when, what, and how many proteins are produced. The genome regulates the production of proteins to sense the environment, seek nutrition and energy, assimilate matter, and grow and reproduce. The diverse functions, each with a distinct function, and the numbers of each of these proteins produce an incredible ability to change their surroundings, that is, the minutest form of life. The argument for attributing the onus of changes in the entity in response to the environmental conditions is within the entity itself by virtue of internal information. Some cells, when in bodies of organisms, can change the composition of their cytoplasm or the cell membrane to maintain their cellular states. Living organisms have subtle, reversible responses that enable them to adapt to periodic environmental changes. Imagine what multicellular organisms can do if individual cells have so much capacity. In multicellular organisms, the individual cells form coherent tissues and organs, each level of organization adding a higher level of emergence. The organism is the physical embodiment of matter and energy, and life is the emergent phenomenon resulting from the organization of atoms, molecules, organelles, cells, tissues, and organs. The individual molecules and cells are separated from the direct impact of the environment. The body, in turn, responds as a unit to the environmental stringencies. Similarly, multiple organisms can form a social unit with a division of labor and a specific hierarchy to contribute to themselves by contributing to the group. Together, the groups can build huge nests, dams, burrows, and houses. Ants build anthills, bees build hives, birds build nests, meerkats build burrows, and humans build houses. By doing so, As groups, individuals are protected from the impact of their environments. Japanese macaque monkeys are one of the two primate species, the other being humans, that can live in snow, often referred to as just snow monkeys. They survive there for at least two reasons. One is the thermal spring nearby, where the monkeys take hot baths to withstand the bitter cold. There is an instinctive behavior where they huddle together, reducing the body's surface area and reducing the loss of body heat, cumulative. Penguins in Antarctica also use the same behavior. They have not planned or calculated the amount of body heat loss or the surface area. They just do it. The behavior keeps their existence in the harsh environment. Living things have the inherent capacity to self-regulate or manipulate the environment to exist despite the environmental change. That is the self. Existence is a spatio-temporal physical stagnation in a universe of continuous change. All physical entities are defined by their ability to retain form and function, manifesting their existence. Some exist for extended periods, while others are fleeting. In the realm of living organisms, existence is the result of nature's relentless experimentation, its selection. This process is devoid of intention, akin to nature rolling dice. The critical distinction is that some entities perish sooner than others, while those better adapted persist longer. Furthermore, entities that replicate or propagate themselves extend their identity across time. In contrast, the existence of non-living things is entirely deterministic. Their fate is governed solely by the effective environment, with no capacity to influence outcomes or respond to environmental changes. Non-living entities follow a single path dictated by external conditions, unable to alter the trajectory of their existence.